5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
The United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. These are three of the largest institutions in the world, yet all three are impaired by the separation that occurs between the decisions they make and the people in whose name those decisions are made. Rather than championing equality, they can act as a process by which the world's richest countries can dictate to its poorest. The United Nations is a coalition of 192 states, yet the decision-making of this body is purely reliant on just 5. These are the 5 permanent members of the Security Council: the USA, Great Britain, France, Russia, and China. Under Article 108 of the UN Charter, these countries all have a veto on any UN resolution, so for any action to take place, these 5 countries must all agree. This effectively means that the votes of all the other countries are irrelevant. Similarly, both the World Bank and the IMF require an 85% majority to pass any substantial resolution, but the share of votes within each of these institutions is not equal. The USA controls 17% of the shares in the IMF and 15% of the shares in the World Bank. Thus, no decision can be made in the IMF or World Bank unless the United States agrees to it. In this way, the USA can scupper any decision that the majority of the countries wish to perform, and the rich can dictate to the poorest the way in which they should be governed. Small, poorer countries have little or no standing in these institutions, for the bigger a political unit is, the less democratic it is, because there is less chance that your voice will be heard. The UN, IMF, and World Bank are giant global institutions. Were this taking place on a national level, we would immediately recognise this as an oligarchy or an autocracy, but because we are not confronted with the system's complete lack of democracy, we do nothing. The people of poorer countries, however, are confronted with this every single day, as they are the ones who suffer the effects of unfair trade, national debt, and Western economic intervention, and so they are far more aware of the monstrosities done in our name, yet they can do absolutely nothing about it because the actions of their governments are barred. The responsibility then is on us as citizens of the nations which have a larger say within these institutions to end such an unfair distribution of power. However, we are also unable to act because our own governments never engage with its citizens about these issues. There is a complete disjunction between ourselves and what we might wish for and what is done in our name at the international level. In a world of photocopy democracy, we elect a government for a handful of parochial issues: crime, tax, domestic economy, seldom an international issue unless we are engaged in a war that threatens our national integrity. The elected government then appoints figures onto the worldwide platforms of the UN, World Bank, and IMF. But this action was not what we voted for, and at no point has legitimacy been conferred upon it. There is no connection at all in the way an institution like the UN makes decisions through our national representatives and the demands and will of the people they supposedly represent. And the best illustration to prove this: what is the name of the British ambassador to the United Nations?
Holy fuck! Oh my god! Oh my god! I was shocked, just like everyone else on this planet. I was angry seeing almost 3,000 people being killed. I saw it again and again, because the media had nothing else to talk about for the weeks in the aftermath. I got hypnotized. I felt hate and more hate. Hate towards those they told me again and again who were responsible. Bin Laden and those terrorists in a faraway land. I said, let's just drop the bomb on those fuckers. I was thinking like this for 4 years. In the meantime, I moved to Denmark, a nation with many immigrants from the Middle East. I learned that the image I had been given on the Muslim community was a lie. The image I had was created from the mainstream media, which was my only source of information at the time. Then in 2005, I got a connection to the internet, my first computer in 5 years. I started searching for information connected to the date 9/11. What I found was completely different than what I learned from the mainstream media. Many questions I heard for the first time, questions that I could not create on my own just by reading the morning newspaper or watching the nightly news. Questions like, where was NORAD on this day? Where is the airplane at the Pentagon? Why is the hole in the Pentagon smaller than the airplane? Why did the towers fall in freefall speed? Why did Building 7 collapse? The list is long. With all the evidence I had seen on the 9/11 incident that broke down the official story in so many ways, I started to believe my nagging feeling. There's definitely something wrong. I started to question everything. I asked myself, if this 9/11 event is a conspiracy, what else is being hidden? What other events or situations could be manipulated? What if our whole society is there to serve the few? My nagging feeling said yes. J. Edgar Hoover said, "The individual is handicapped by coming face to face with a conspiracy so monstrous he cannot believe it exists. The American mind simply has not come to a realization of the evil which has been introduced into our midst." So I asked myself, what in our society has full power over my actions? I found one thing that has way too much power over my actions. A power that decides if I can make a feature-length film or not. A power that decides if I go on vacation or not. A power that decides if I sell myself or not. A power that decides if I have a home or not. A power that can decide if I eat or not. This power is the monetary system, our money. Everything rolls around it. Everyone needs it. And every decision in life today is made with the monetary situation in mind. So I asked, where does the money come from? What is money? At first, I believed that our government is making this money for the people it serves. I was wrong.
Then we have the money. What you do is you go to the bank and you borrow money that has never, does not, and will never exist, called credit, and then you mortgage your house to it, you mortgage your car to it, your land to it, your business to it, and if you don't pay back money that doesn't exist, called credit, then the people that have lent you that non-existent money get your car and your business and your house. Yes, that makes sense. And this money scam, where they get us into debt by borrowing money that has never, does not, will never exist, is in the very DNA of society. It controls choice, controls maneuverability, or if we allow it to, controls society. And who controls money? Controls society. Who controls money? A tiny few people, as we'll see. But you don't want to talk about that. Hey, honey, quick, on the Jerry Springer show, this man's going to hit his girlfriend. Quick, quick. Watch this. Shut up.
For a long time, we have had two sets of laws. The law of the land and the law of the water. The law of the land is the law of any land, and they are different between different places. You can do certain things in Denmark that you cannot do in Russia, and vice versa. The law of the water is called Maritime Admiralty Law. These laws are above any law of any land. These laws came about centuries ago when ships sailed the seas with all sorts of goods between different places. When our monetary system started to become worldwide, Maritime Admiralty Law became the law of banking. They are also the laws of churches and courts. When you stand inside a bank, the laws you know in your land no longer apply. There are different laws for you when you stand in a bank or when you stand outside of it. You can see in many banks and courts the maritime flag of the nation it is in. Maritime flags of nations on ships are there to tell what laws apply to that ship. Same with the bank. In the US, the maritime flag is almost the same flag as the US flag. The only difference is that this flag has a golden border. Notice that every US soldier has that flag on its arm, and not the regular US flag. This should tell you who those soldiers are really working for.
The world of admiralty it's a concept and it's a philosophy. There's two kinds of law in the world. There's civil law and there's the law of water and money. Well, we have our common law system where collective groups of people come together and they agree to follow particular behavioral patterns. However, the banking system, or the banksters or gangsters or whatever you want to call them, have collectively, through thousands of years, have set up a situation where they can manipulate people to superimpose a legal system that is not based entirely on law, it's based on commerce. And so this artificial let's pretend construct has basically been superimposed over our law of our land.
I learned the rules of modern banking. It is called fractional reserve banking system. Every bank in the world only has to have a fraction of the amount that the bank has in store to loan out to other people. That is, a bank can loan out to you $100 when it only has $10 in store. And those $10 is other people's money that they keep in their computer vaults. Today we live with fiat money. What does fiat money mean? A currency that a government has declared to be legal tender, despite the fact that it has no real value and is not backed by any reserves. Historically, most currencies were based on physical commodities such as gold or silver, but fiat money is solely based on faith. Money as religion. This money is printed by private organizations all over the world and loaned to governments with interests. These interests are the debt of most nations today. This made me think. Money is the main brainwash tool. Mayor Rothschild said, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes the laws." The Federal Reserve, the central bank of the USA, is not federal. It is a privately owned company set up in England, which nobody knows who owns. Nor does it have any reserves. Woodrow Wilson was the US president that signed into law the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, something he regretted later in his life. Woodrow Wilson said on his deathbed, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men."
We are told that America is the land of laws, a nation built on laws. In point of fact, nothing could be further from the truth. America is run by people who are lawless. We have no law in America, and understand that. The law is whatever the powers that be in power happen to say it is today. Whatever they say it is, that's what the law is today. And it may change tomorrow.
In 1933, the USA became bankrupt in the middle of a depression, which was created because of the Federal Reserve Act. It is still bankrupt. This creature called the United States is not a nation at all, but merely a corporation which is in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. This corporation was set up in England in 1868. The President of the USA is a president of a privately owned company that works under maritime admiralty law. All corporations have presidents, for they work under maritime admiralty law. Just this fact alone should tell the average human being that we are not being told the truth. We are being manipulated. When USA became bankrupt, the banks asked the US government, "How are you going to pay? What is your collateral?" The government answered back, "The people is our collateral." Today, on the back of US birth certificates are the markings of banks. In other words, the banks own the people. Minimum wage, what is it? To me, it is the salary of a slave. A slave needs to be kept alive and healthy so that the work can be done. Today, I see people living a life where they work hard and long hours but never get a paycheck that lasts them longer than towards the next paycheck. The modern slave takes care of his own slavery. The most hard-working slave is the one slave who believes he is free.
Tell the truth, don't be bullshitting people. Like I say, there's enough bullshit as it is. There's enough bullshit as it is. In fact, there's just enough. Did you know that? There's just enough bullshit to hold things together in this country. Bullshit is the glue that binds us as a nation. Where would we be without our safe, familiar American bullshit? Land of the free, home of the brave, the American dream. All men are equal, justice is blind, the press is free, your vote counts. Business is honest, the good guys win, the police are on your side, God is watching you, your standard of living will never decline, and everything is gonna be just fine. The official national bullshit story. I call it the American okey doke.
We are told we are free, but I do not feel that I'm free. We are ruled by the rule of force. Just look at what happens when you do not comply to your government, when you don't pay your taxes. Why do we keep playing the game? I mean, would you play Monopoly with other people when the banker is always cheating? That is what we do in real life. Why do we accept it?
The whole court system, our whole monetary system, is based on ancient esoteric principles. Your body's energy, it's a vessel. Your body's a vessel. You have blood vessels, etc. And you're traveling on the seas of commerce. Not really, because we're on land, but they superimpose the world of admiralty on us. And anyone can verify this because the Navy has surveyed all the land in the continental United States. And there's brass cap high watermarks in all the local towns and counties. So they've, in a let's pretend game, they said we're underwater right now. That's why they have jurisdiction of admiralty. And it's, unless you rebut that presumption of jurisdiction or the admiralty realm, it shall reign supreme.
This monetary system is the direct cause for about 20,000 people dying every day from hunger. 20,000 people! Why? Well, today our world is home to 6.7 billion people. Humans currently consume 20% more natural resources than the Earth can produce. The West comprises only 10% of the world populations, but consumes 50% of the world resources we produce. And we release 80% of the world pollutants. Just this tells me how it can be that so many people suffer. My lifestyle is a cause for this suffering. And if only people in my society would allow themselves to feel the pain of this suffering and understand our connection to it, then we would no longer accept the pain caused by our lifestyle.
War, poverty, corruption, hunger, misery, human suffering will not change in a monetary system. That is, there'll be very little significant change. It's going to take the redesign of our culture, our values, and it has to be related to the carrying capacity of the earth, not some human opinion or some politician's notions of the way the world ought to be, or some religious notions of the conduct of human affairs.
In East Germany, before the Berlin Wall fell, the idea was that everyone should hold a job, even though there weren't enough jobs for the people. One man worked at the crossroad controlling the street lights. All day he sat there turning lights from red to green and back to red again. All day. When the workday ended, he stood up, pressed the automatic button, and went home. What a waste.
It's not politicians that can solve problems. They have no technical capabilities. They don't know how to solve problems. Even if they were sincere, they don't know how to solve problems. It's the technicians that produce the desalination plants. It's the technicians that give you electricity, that give you motor vehicles, that heat your house and cool it in the summertime. It's technology that solves problems, not politics. Politics cannot solve problems because they're not trained to do so.
Technology is exactly the reason for Iceland's economy crashing in 2008. The fishing industry died the same day the fishing trawler fleet was replaced by fishing freeze trawlers in the 80s. Before that, the industry was kept alive because the trawlers fished around Iceland and brought the fish back to land to be worked on by people, packaging and freezing the product. The freezing trawlers made it possible to work the fish and freeze it on board with machines, making the industry on land obsolete. This of course should have freed most Icelanders from the repetitive jobs and give everyone a comfortable life. But because of the quota regulations, the right to fish is in the hands of the few, keeping the populations in heavy debt to the bankers. Today, Iceland is in the process of losing its independence to the EU.
And the question that's raised by politicians is, how much will a project cost? The question is not how much will it cost. Do we have the resources? And we have the resources today to house everyone, build hospitals all over the world, build schools all over the world, the finest equipment and labs for teaching and doing medical research. So you see, we have all that, but we're in a monetary system. And in a monetary system, there's profit.
A monetary system is a slave system. The money is the incentive for people to misuse their power. Many problems of this world derive from the money. Prostitution, theft, poaching, human trafficking, drug trafficking, politicians. It is very easy through money to exclude an individual from taking part in anything. So, what is the answer? All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as self-evident.
And in fact, I had a vision of a way we could have no enemies ever again, if you're interested in this. Anybody interested in hearing this? It's kind of an interesting theory, and all we have to do is make one decisive act and we can rid the world of all our enemies at once. Here's what we do. You know all that money we spend on nuclear weapons and defense every year? Trillions of dollars. Instead, if we spent that money feeding and clothing the poor of the world, which it would pay for many times over, not one human being excluded, not one, we could as one race explore outer space together in peace forever. Thank you very much. You're great.
Already today, technology is taking away jobs, and when a machine takes my job in this growth-based economy, how can I support myself? How am I supposed to sell myself for money?
Now, America is inclined toward fascism. It has a propensity by its dominant philosophy and religion to uphold the fascist point of view. American industry is essentially a fascist institution. If you don't understand that, the minute you punch that time clock, you walk into a dictatorship.
We're given notions about the respectability of work, and I really look at it as being paid slavery.
They're brought up to believe that you shall earn your living by the sweat of your brow. That holds people back, freeing people from drudgery, repetitive jobs which make them ignorant. You rob them. In our society, that is a resource-based economy, machines free people. You see, we can't imagine that because we've never known that kind of world.
What we want to do is to eliminate the causes of the problems, eliminate the processes that produce greed and bigotry and prejudice and people taking advantage of one another and elitism, eliminating the need for prisons and welfare. We have always had these problems because we have always lived within scarcity and barter and monetary systems that produce scarcity.
If you eradicate the conditions that generate what you call socially offensive behavior, it does not exist. The guy said, well, isn't that inborn? No, it's not.
There is no human nature, there's human behavior, and that's always been changed throughout history. You're not born with bigotry and greed and corruption and hatred. You pick that up within the society.
Is there a hidden hand? Is the world like this because someone wants it to be like this? Or is it just one monumental coincidence?
There's something I got to say, and I got to say it real clear. So take notes. This is the only place I'm going to say it. There are three things which unequivocally and absolutely guarantee near-term extinction of the human species and quite possibly all life on the planet. They are out on the table. They're acknowledged, repeatedly confirmed and corroborated, and they are having direct, painful, and tangible impacts on our lives this minute. And they have all direct bearing on each other. The first of these is global warming and climate chaos caused by human industrial activity, aka infinite growth. Of a certainty, a 4 to 6 degree centigrade temperature increase is in the very near future. And by what is now not an extreme calculation, the last of our species should be gone by 2030 because the ecosystem which we need to provide us food, water, air, and habitable climates will have been destroyed. The web of life ripped to shreds. It may very well happen much sooner than that. According to Guy McPherson, the only thing which might have the slightest mitigating impact on global warming over which humankind has any control would be the immediate cessation of all industrial activity on a planetary level, immediately removing the ever-increasing release of carbon into the atmosphere by a meme which runs us and owns us rather than the other way around. And it is a meme which must play itself out to the end. The second of these causes of death is radiation. By now we understand fully that the totally unresolved and uncontrolled disaster at Fukushima has for 33 months bombarded the entire northern hemisphere and Pacific Ocean with radiation. A lesser realized truth is that there are some 60 nuclear power plants around the United States that are boiling along long past their planned operating lives. They're rickety, they have fires, they have leaks, they have cooling system failures, they flood. There are also many nuclear storage facilities like Hanford and Westlake outside of St. Louis, which in the case of Hanford are releasing, or Westlake are in serious danger of releasing enormous quantities of radiation into the air, water tables, and soil. It takes 40 years, a lot of money, energy, and an enormous amount of fossil fuel to fully decommission a nuclear reactor. Absent industrial civilization, it will never be possible to safely shut down all 450 operating nuclear reactors and recover or maintain control of perhaps thousands of nuclear waste facilities around the world. And our obligation is to provide safe and secure storage for all of that radioactive waste for 1 million years. Mankind has yet to build a structure which will last 50,000 years, let alone 1 million. Damned if we do, damned if we don't. But there's a third element that triply seals our fate. It's called exponential growth. Just recently on Facebook, a friend posted a great video from the late Professor Al Bartlett of Princeton, who throughout his career, man, he was the champion of sounding the alarm on what exponential growth means. He was a fabulous human being, and he had a wicked sense of humor. So much fun to be with. This isn't higher math. It's actually simple arithmetic. If one starts with a square on a checkerboard and puts 1 grain of rice on that square, 2 on the next, 4 on the next, 8 on the next, doubling for each square. By the time one reaches the last of 64 squares, there will be an amount of rice greater than the annual output of most Asian nations combined. Now let's look at infinite growth as though it were taking place in a glass or a petri dish, or on a finite planet which, when full and containing no more resources, spells the complete die-off of whatever was growing inside due to resource exhaustion. It's true for caribou, it's true for bacteria, it's true for human beings. As the late Terence McKenna warned as he predicted the end of history in the late 1990s, if the doubling takes place every minute, then just 1 minute before the inevitable population collapse, the petri dish would only be half full. When McKenna sounded these warnings, roughly a decade before I started, human population was only 3.5 billion. That's in the 90s, late 80s and 90s. Clinton was president. Human population has since doubled in less than 20 years. With enough resources, it would double again in less than 15, but we can clearly see that the petri dish is full. Look around. As we go live on the air tonight, Fukushima's ongoing deadly release of radiation has not been contained for 33 months. New records for radioactive emissions are announced weekly. The Japanese, as they have done continually for more than 30 months, are incinerating tons of highly radioactive waste directly into the atmosphere every day. The International Atomic Energy Agency has granted TEPCO permission to release all of its radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. The carnage that is human industrial civilization continues absolutely unabated and unrestrained. Tens of thousands of coal-fired generating plants continue to operate around the world. Tens of thousands of natural gas-fired plants using fracked gas continue to destroy water tables, cause earthquakes, and add to the ever-increasing amounts of carbon being released into the atmosphere. The plants themselves may not, but the extraction of the gas they burn is one of the most carbon-intensive and destructive toxic processes known. In Canada, the tar sands are being voraciously mined with continuing release of carbon, environmental destruction, and rapacious ruination of fresh water supplies. In North Dakota, so-called shale oil production proceeds with ferocious intensity. Factories and corporations required to show growth and profit continue to churn out cars and TVs and cell phones and junk, all wrapped in plastic which will last about as long as the radioactive waste. And because the cheap, easy energy is gone, every year industrial nations resort to more damaging, more desperate, more carbon-intensive means to get their hands on less and less energy, often expending more energy to obtain what they call fuel than they get from burning it. Absolutely nothing has been or is being done about the things that are really killing us, and not just us, but every living thing on the planet. Just a lot of talk. Well, I've been talking for 35 years, and I'm almost done with it. Every day, as more than 250,000 new humans arrive on the planet, more than 200 species go extinct forever. Exponential growth of human population has never been addressed, in large part because the economic mandate for infinite growth has never been addressed. Thus, the pressures to not do anything at all about radiation and global warming is even greater. I call it catch-22 cubed. More people need more heat, more power, more food grown with fossil fuels, more. This is the end of more. As the eschaton event emerges and as we approach it with ever-increasing clarity about what it is, I've noticed on Facebook, where I've invested enormous energy in community building and consciousness raising, a disappointing trend of late. Briefly summarized, it goes like this. The more clearly we see our imminent physical demise, the more people tend to talk about things that are irrelevant to it. They want to talk about Ed Snowden. They want to talk about disaster capitalism. They want to talk about Iran-Contra. They want to talk about whether a specific and alarming radiation reading in Death Valley or Idaho or Colorado or Washington actually came from Fukushima or not. They want to talk about who did or did not make a good reading somewhere. They want to talk which competing theory or hypothesis on the actual conditions at Fukushima is correct, instead of talking about the fact that we know that what we are being told is an absolute lie. They want to talk about Al Bartlett's personality as opposed to the simple arithmetic he presented, which they still refuse to see. My sense of Facebook is that people are using more and more intelligence and effort to find things to divert their attention away from rather than towards a reality that is becoming more and more abundantly clear to millions, tens of millions, and soon to be billions of people on this deeply wounded planet. Well, baby, if that's your game, and I play it, and I continue to play it, then all I'm doing is validating your game. I've reached a point of diminishing marginal returns, and this week I pretty much exiled myself from Facebook. It's incredibly useful. It's safe. It's well crafted, and there's a great tribe handling it. It's free from disinformation, and in my absence, it will be cared for and protected, and it's going to be a very vibrant, safe place where the people who are on the cutting edge of all this can gather. And I encourage you to do that. But I'm checking out basically. But in the meantime, reading anything at all that's not about industrial civilization ending a reality-based approach to dwelling with a nuclear power underway or an actual end to infinite growth, you're wasting, unless it has to do with one of those three things, you're wasting my time. I'm ready to almost strangle the next person who starts any sentence with, "we could." We know what's here. We're beginning to understand what it means, and it's high time we turned our full gaze and attention to it. This is the culminating event of all of what we have called history. It's here, it's now, it's what we came here to witness and be a part of. There's no game left to play but to face it. Not facing it will produce what Terence McKenna called a fire in a madhouse. In upcoming shows, I'll be discussing more of the only thing that makes sense of it all, and doing so more of that every week, and from my own life's long and arduous journey. There's the stuff making sense, closing the circle of my story. I call it the safety valve at the end of history. That's where we'll be focusing. So it's time to sit back, put my feet up, focus on Senator